Hail and well met, brave adventurers. I am DM Bob Yo. Today is Thursday, and that means it's time for another episode of Ask the DM. Now, as you can see, I have learned this week a little bit about using the okay, I apparently don't know which way is left or right, but I've learned a little bit about using the graphics and whatnot in my video editor. So I'm tickled about that. I'm glad to be able to have that for you today. So anyway, make sure you like and subscribe and all that pitchy stuff that everybody asks when you watch a YouTube video. So today, let's get right into it. Today, I want to spend time answering just a single question that I had from a reader and from a player, an aspiring DM, because I think it's one that requires a good deal of attention. So the question was this: how do you build a campaign setting? How do you build your own world? And now, when it comes to world building, you will have as many opinions as there are DMs, and that's as it should be. Your world that you build for Dungeons and Dragons should be as unique as you are. In many ways, it will reflect your personality, your ideas, your ideals. Just as a character reflects an individual's, a player's worldview and their personality, so your world as a DM will reflect yours. But where do you start? Well, there are a couple of different approaches, and whichever one works for you is the one that works for you, quite simply. Now, I like the idea, and this is one that was described by Ed Greenwood back in the early 2000s at a seminar at Gen Con, and what he described was starting out essentially in a locale, a small one, a village even. And so you describe the village, and you describe the terrain around it, and what kind of adventuring opportunities there might be, and you start to describe the flora and the fauna and the geography. Are there mountains, are there rivers, are there forests? And you go into as much detail as needed. Don't necessarily obsess and spend just years on a single location, but you spend a good bit of time fleshing that out. And then as you go along, again, as you're exploring the geography around it, you then sort of in concentric circles coming out from that first village, you grow your world. You begin to describe the next village over, and then a town that is the nearest town, and then the nearest city, building all the way up into whether it's city states or nation states, large regional sort of governmental as well as social, and all those sorts of things. And then from there on to continents, and from there even out into the cosmology of your world, so the planes and the gods and all that sort of thing. Now, there are some advantages and disadvantages to that approach. One of the advantages is that if you do it as you're running a particular adventuring party, the world will grow with your player characters. They'll grow together, and so the world will very much feel like their home, and it will very much feel like a place where those characters belong, and they'll also help to define it collaboratively through the D&D playing process. Some players will be more collaborative than others. Some will have ideas. Some will not have as many sort of flavorful contributions, but which brings us to another sort of a side point here. Collaborative world building. I like to take the approach with world building that I'm building it alongside my players, and that rather than the creator of the world, I'm merely the editor and the gatherer of information. I guess gatekeeper, maybe, in terms of the information for the world. Yes, I technically have the final say, but I very much, want to encourage my players to participate in the world building process. Again, that's sort of a parenthetical. Now, the other way to world build is to go, instead, is to go from outward in. So you start with, what does the world look like in terms of continents, and then you zero in on one of them, and you sort of describe the regions on that continent, and then you move into a region, and then into a kingdom, and then into a city or other specific locations. And you don't flesh everything out as you go through, but you at the very least have placeholders that you can come back and fill the details in later. And so you're spending equal amounts of time developing the setting that your players are in, their immediate surroundings, as well as developing the rest of the world, the things that they won't maybe see for several levels. So those are kind of the two basic approaches that people take. I guess really the realistic approach, the third approach, is some combination of the two. Probably a great focus on one area from time to time, and then as time allows, fleshing out bigger picture, and that can happen just through the course of adventuring. If the players happen upon a portal, or they have a mission that their patron wants them to accomplish that's several hundred miles away, you wind up creating more of the world that isn't in the immediate vicinity. I also like to, as a world builder, as a GM, I like to recommend that folks develop themes. And this isn't, of course, unique with me. You can find, I saw this first discussed in the 4th edition Dungeon Master's Guide, but the idea that your world and your campaign has, 4 or 5 specific themes. So by that, what I mean, for example, is in Obsidian Shards, my homemade world, one of the themes is that the world is magical. Specifically, it's a world of high magic. Consumable magic, common consumable magic items like potions of healing can be purchased in all but the smallest of settlements. And the temples and mages offer spellcasting for a fee regularly. So magic becomes part of the world economy. Now, a tried and true world builder will develop the economic implications of magic on the economy, but we're going to be outside of our discussion today. A second theme in my world is that the world is very, very old, and not just millions, maybe even billions of years, with the idea that the world has many times over, perhaps, had civilizations rise to high levels of technology and then fall. So much so that from time to time, odd technology might be discovered in the world. And I stole this directly from Gary Gygax and the early iterations of D&D, World of Greyhawk, especially, where you have adventures like Expedition to the Barrier Peaks, where you're essentially adventuring on a spaceship that is many, many, millennia old. And then another theme that I have, and I'm not going to go through all of them, but another theme is that humans are not the dominant species. So I have in my world what are called the wise folk, and that refers to intelligent humanoid type creatures. So elves and dwarfs and halflings and even sort of tieflings and dragonborn and the civilized elements of goblinkin even, and orcs. And humans are sort of the new kids on the block. They're just a few hundred years out of the caves, and they've adapted quite readily to civilization with the wise folk, and they've spread fast, so much so that in the Obsidian Shards world, there is a saying that goes, they multiply like humans, right? Like we would talk about something multiplying like rabbits. So those are just three of the themes in my campaign, and those sort of define much of the day-to-day experience that the players have as they play through my campaign. And I definitely encourage you to develop, between 4 and 7 of those, I would say, for your campaign world, because those are always fallbacks. If you're looking for inspiration for an adventure, or you're sort of put on the spot to create a situation, you can fall back on your themes and develop something that feels like it was consistently prepared. All right, so those are my thoughts on world building and campaign building. Again, make sure you like and subscribe. Visit my website, my Facebook up there, of course. Send me questions that you have for next week. And until then, I'll see you out in the world.